I've known tons of people from USAID, but they tend to be all different levels.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming out on a rainy day. We don't seem to have any kind of good weather in this town anymore, so no matter, at least it wasn't a snowstorm. I want to introduce myself. I'm Mark Nelson. I'm Senior Director here at the National Endowment for Democracy and in charge of the Center for International Media Assistance. And I want to welcome our very impressive panel and a very impressive audience of people. We're going to be having a conversation, an open conversation this afternoon about the taking stock of where we are in the whole media development field at this very difficult moment when there are so many challenges out there and so many places closing down. We want to step back and look at the whole field and talk a little bit about what the options are in this environment. We're also here to celebrate a bit the launch of our new website, which some of you may have seen and which you can see later on the screen behind us. There's a computer that'll be back there, and we'll be showing some pages from it up above. It's been a chance for us to sort of rethink our strategy and consolidate our thinking a little bit around what our priorities are. And I think it's a really important time for this field because, as I say, there's a lot of work that needs to be done and a lot of challenges out there. I'd like to thank all the people who were involved in putting this together, both and our staff as well as Ned and the Forum for Democratic Studies, which has helped us staff this event. And for those of you who are following online, you can follow and contribute to the discussion using the hashtag MediaDev, just MEDIADEV, yeah, and send your questions to @CIMA_media. Your questions will get into the room, and we would really love to receive some questions from people who are observing from online. As I said, we've got some of the leading stars in the media development field with us today, and we're really privileged to have this panel. Sitting here to my left is David Young, who is the Deputy Assistant Administrator in USAID's Bureau for Democracy, Conflict, and Humanitarian Assistance. To his left is Ann Nelson, no relation, of Columbia University, who has been an old CIMA hand and has written a lot on this topic and is a recognized author on the subject. To her left is Harlan Mandel, who is the CEO of Development Investment Fund. And finally is Jeanne Bourgault, who is president and CEO of Internews and also a really important partner of CIMA's and someone who has known this field starting almost from the beginning. We're here to look at this field, as I said, at a time of enormous political challenges as well as technological change, because it's really upsetting the apple cart in so many ways, and people are having to really work very hard to understand what to do and how to do it. And we at CIMA decided to refocus our work on the media development subject because we think it is really continues to be a really important and relevant concept for the world that we're in right now. Because all of the literature that has linked the role of free media to democratic and economic outcomes focuses on this concept of having good quality local media that is independent and able to cover local events so that people get the information they need to participate in the democratic and decision-making processes. And when that's not there, I think we're just deepening the difficulties that we have. And I think one of the reasons that we want to refocus on this is to try to create the space and discussion about what we're doing, how we're doing it, how it's changed by technology and the kinds of disruption that's going on in the markets. Um, and we also to draw down our focus to 4 critical areas that we want to look at, both that I think describe pretty carefully a lot of CIMA's existing work, as well as create a platform for us to think about the future. And those 4 areas are effectiveness, um, sustainability, innovation, and funding. Effectiveness being the kinds of work that the people in this room are involved in, helping countries through the international aid system to develop their institutions and to do work, and how effective those are, and how well they work, and what we can learn from them. Sustainability, the whole concept of what kind of business models and what kinds of support that can be taken up and carried on by local people when international assistance is gone. Innovation coming from the side of not only the massive changes in the technology field, but also the innovations that some of you are undertaking in the way you deliver programs, and how innovative they are, and maybe being able to help countries leapfrog into new ways of doing things. To some countries, I think will eventually just skip the whole traditional media and jump immediately into the digital world, for example. So we're looking at innovation from that whole area. And funding, which has been an important area of CIMA's past work and continues to be of enormous interest to people in this field. What are donors doing? What are their priorities? What is the level of funding? What kinds of what countries are we focusing on, and how are we reacting to this major disruption that is going on in this field? So all of this is on our website, and I hope you will find it useful and helpful in being able to find not only our past reports, but the things that we will be working on in the future. So I want to start what will be a kind of conversation with our panelists today by asking David, who has been involved in democratic work for most of his life in democratic assistance, and he's been the co-chair of the governance network at the OECD, a grouping of the 29 donors, the major donors, where there's a conversation going on right now about how to deal with this world we're in. And we're going to focus a little. Each panelist is going to focus on one of our 4 areas. And David chose the effectiveness word. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit about this effectiveness debate that you're heavily involved in, and what kind of lessons does it bring to the media development field? What do we learn about effectiveness by looking at the broader debate that's going on among the donors on this topic?
Thank you, Mark, for that question. Thanks for your kind invitation to be here today. I'm very pleased to be here and join this launch of the new CIMA website. Let me congratulate both CIMA in particular and the National Endowment for Democracy, both the programming side and the analytical side, for the tremendous work that they do on behalf of democratic governance and human rights generally, but on behalf of independent media in particular. You know, Mark, to return the compliment, Mark and colleagues like James Dean of the BBC World Service Trust are really leading lights in the international diplomatic discourse on development, media development, and aid effectiveness, which I will go into briefly. So congratulations for the strategic reorientation of the website. I surfed it this morning, found it very effective. I think the strategic goals or strategic challenges that you enumerated, effectiveness, sustainability, innovation, or funding, are exactly right, and it's a great way to order your work going forward.
Thank you.
So I'm going to talk about big E or uppercase effectiveness, and then pivot back to little e or lowercase effectiveness in the context of USAID's work. The big E is about the broader international donor discourse on it. So let me start with the big E and talk about media development in the context of the really 15-year-long debate now on aid effectiveness. And I don't know if many of you are privy to these international debates. We tend to be siloized in the development community. So make no apologies if you're not familiar with a lot of these acronyms and gobbledygook that I'll speak of. But I think it's important to understand the context that all of you work in, because we're all struggling as international activists to create the space, larger space for media development. So the big E, effectiveness. It overlaps in time with the debate about the Millennium Development Goals, which, as many of you know, derived from the Millennium Declaration, which world leaders signed in September 2000 at the special session of the UN General Assembly. The Millennium Development Goals were picked from the gorgeous, robust, strong text at the turn of the millennium, and they picked out, the UN officials that built the Millennium Development Goals as an instrument of poverty reduction and democracy and human rights. They took from that glorious text specific time-bound, concrete poverty reduction goals. There were 8 of them altogether, and they are expiring this year, so that's why we are debating the post-2015 development agenda. But the aid effectiveness debate grew up around the Millennium Development Goals. And the reason it arose goes something like this. The development enterprise, at least in the post-World War II version, had been going on for 50 years, ever since the end of World War II. Many, many donors were involved, of course, many, many NGOs, many organizations all around the world. Around the turn of the century and the turn of the millennium, people started looking at each other and said, let's get real and let's get more honest with ourselves in the international discourse. We are now beholden to achieve by 2020 these concrete 8 poverty reduction, Millennium Development Goals. How are we really going to do it?